The ground shook with the sound of heavy boots as the human was dragged through the alien city. His hands were bound with glowing chains, his face cut and bruised, but his eyes still carried fire. The aliens shouted at him, calling him predator, as if the word itself was poison. He looked around and saw tall towers, glowing symbols, and thousands of eyes staring at him with fear. Mothers pulled their children close, warriors spat at his feet, and elders whispered prayers as if his very presence could curse them. He did not understand their language fully, but he understood their fear. To them, he was not a man. He was a beast, a killer, a dangerous creature who should never have been born. The council had already spoken. Today would be his last day. He was to die, not for what he had done, but for what he could do. They feared his strength, his cunning, his ability to survive where others perished. The soldiers pushed him into a giant open square where a tall black platform waited. The crowd roared like a storm. Strange alien banners flapped in the wind, each one painted with the mark of justice. A massive alien executioner stood ready, his armor shining and his weapon glowing red hot. The human felt the weight of eyes on him, thousands of them, burning with hate and fear. He lifted his chin, refusing to bow, even as they jeered at him. If this was his end, he would not give them the pleasure of seeing him break. A loud horn blew, echoing through the city. An elder stepped forward, his robe dragging on the stone. His voice boomed, translated by machines. This creature is no ally. This creature is no equal. He is a predator, a danger to our people. By order of the council, he shall be executed at once. His death will bring safety to all. The crowd cheered. Some threw stones, others spat. The human clenched his fists, feeling the chains dig deeper into his skin. He could break them. He knew he could. But if he tried, they would strike him down before he took a single step. His breath grew heavy, his heart pounded, but he kept his eyes locked on the executioner. If he was to die, he would die staring into the face of his killer. The executioner raised the weapon. The air sizzled with heat. A hush fell over the crowd. Children leaned forward. Elders waited with cold eyes. The soldiers tightened their grip on the chains. The human's muscles coiled, his instincts screaming at him to fight, to strike, to escape. But there was nowhere to go. Then, just as the weapon was about to fall, a sharp voice cut through the silence. Stop. Every head turned. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the council's hall. She was tall, her skin marked with glowing lines, her armor elegant yet deadly. Her presence silenced even the loudest voices. The executioner froze, lowering his weapon slightly. The human stared, confused, his breath caught in his chest. The woman walked forward slowly, her eyes never leaving him. There was something strange in her gaze. Not fear, not hate, but calculation. She stopped before the platform and addressed the council. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that made even hardened warriors lower their eyes. "This man is not to be executed," she declared. The council gasped. The crowd erupted in protest. "He is dangerous," someone shouted. "He will kill us all," another voice cried. "He deserves death." But she raised her hand and the noise died down. Her eyes burned like fire as she turned to the elder. "His skills are valuable. His instincts are sharp. His power is unmatched. Do you not see? You call him predator. Good. Then let the predator hunt for us, not against us." The elder frowned. "You would risk our lives for a beast?" "I would risk nothing," she said firmly. "I would use him. No tool should be wasted, no matter how dangerous it is to hold. If he can kill, then let him kill for us. If he can fight, then let him fight for us." The crowd murmured. The human stood still, stunned. His death had been seconds away, and now this alien woman was fighting for his life. But why? What did she want? He searched her face for answers, but her expression revealed nothing. The elder hesitated. "And if he turns on you? If he betrays you?" "Then his death will be on my hands," she replied without fear. "But until then, his life belongs to me." Silence spread through the square. The council exchanged nervous glances. The executioner stepped back, uncertain. The crowd shifted restlessly, their anger colliding with curiosity. The human felt the chains loosen slightly, though his heart still thundered in his chest. He was alive, at least for now. Finally, the elder raised his hand. "Very well. His life is yours to command. But remember, if he brings death upon us, your name will bear the curse." The woman nodded once. She turned her gaze back to the human, and for the first time he saw the faintest shadow of a smile. Not of kindness, but of intent. She had not saved him out of mercy. She had saved him because she had a plan, and he was part of it. The soldiers pulled him away from the platform, still chained, but no longer facing death. The crowd shouted in anger and confusion. Some cried for blood, others whispered about the woman's boldness. The human did not speak. He only kept his eyes on her, trying to understand. As they dragged him past her, she leaned in close, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You were ready to die today, but I have a better use for you." The words cut through him like a blade. He did not know whether to feel relief or fear. All he knew was that his life had changed in a single moment. He had been a prisoner, a condemned man, a predator waiting for the end. But now, because of her, he was something else, something unknown, and the unknown was far more dangerous than death. The human was dragged through long stone corridors after the execution was stopped. His chains rattled with every step, and the guards pushed him hard, as if reminding him he was still a prisoner. He did not resist. He was still trying to understand what had just happened. A moment ago, he was ready to die. Now he was alive because of that strange alien woman. He kept his eyes forward, but inside his mind questions burned. Who was she? Why had she saved him? At the end of the corridor, he was taken into a wide chamber filled with glowing crystals. The council members stood in a circle, their long robes shining under the light. In the center stood the woman who had stopped his death. She looked calm, her hands clasped behind her back. When the guards pushed him to his knees before her, he met her eyes with defiance. The elder of the council spoke first. "This is madness. You cannot keep him alive. He is dangerous." The woman turned to face them. "I know exactly how dangerous he is. That is why I will keep him alive." The elder's voice shook with anger. "You would protect a beast?" "No," she said coldly. "I would use a beast." The words made the human stiffen. She was not his savior. She was not showing him mercy. She saw him as a weapon, a tool, something to be controlled and pointed at her enemies. He clenched his fists against the chains, but he kept silent, watching, listening. Another counselor hissed, "And if he kills you in your sleep?" She raised her chin. "Then that will be my fate, but I see more in him than you do. You call him predator, yet predators are strong, cunning, and necessary in war. You fear him because you do not know how to control him. But I do." The chamber grew quiet. Even the guards looked uncertain. The human studied her carefully. She spoke with confidence, as if she already knew his nature better than he did. That disturbed him more than the threat of death. Finally, the elder slammed his staff against the stone. "Very well. He is yours, but the blame for his crimes will be yours too." The council left, their robes brushing the floor like whispers. The guards stayed, their weapons ready. The woman moved closer to him and gestured for the guards to release the chains. They obeyed slowly, carefully, as if freeing a wild beast from its cage. The glowing shackles unlocked and fell with a heavy clang. His wrists burned with deep red marks, but he ignored the pain. The moment he was free, the guards tensed, gripping their weapons. The woman only raised her hand to stop them. She looked directly at the human and said, "You live because of me. That means your life is mine to command." He stared at her, silent, his chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. She continued, "You have a choice. You can sit in a cell until I decide you are no longer useful, or you can fight beside me. If you fight, you will be fed, clothed, and maybe one day free. If you refuse, you will be chained again, and this time I will not stop your execution." Her words echoed in his mind. Freedom. It was something he had not heard in a long time. Still, he could not trust her. He narrowed his eyes and spoke for the first time since the platform. "Why me? You have soldiers. You have armies. Why risk using a man you call predator?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Because my soldiers are weak. They are disciplined. But they lack instinct. They lack hunger. You fight to survive. You fight like your life depends on every strike. That is something they cannot learn unless you teach them." His heart thumped harder. Teach them? Was that her plan? She wanted him to train her people to fight like humans. He remembered the faces of the crowd, the hate in their eyes, the stones thrown at him. They wanted him dead, and now she wanted him to make them stronger. He shook his head slowly. "Why should I help those who wanted my blood?" Her voice dropped lower. sharper. Because if you do not, your blood will spill anyway. Do not fool yourself. You are not safe. You are not free. The only reason you draw breath right now is because I stand in front of you, and the only way you keep breathing is by proving your worth to me. The words were heavy, but they were true. He hated them because he knew he had no power. His hands were free, but he was still trapped. His instincts told him to run, to fight, to kill, but his reason told him he would not make it far. Not in a city filled with enemies. The woman watched his silence, then stepped closer. Her voice softened just enough for him to hear only her. I am not your friend. I am not your enemy. I am your chance. Take it or die here. The choice is yours. The guards shifted uncomfortably, waiting for his answer. The human closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. He saw flashes of his life, of battles, of blood, of survival. He was tired of chains, tired of cages, tired of waiting for death. Slowly, he opened his eyes and met her gaze. I will fight, he said, his voice low but firm. But not for you, for me. Her smile grew sharper. That is enough. She turned and gestured for the guards to follow. Take him to my camp. He belongs to me now. As they led him away, the human felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He was not free. Not truly. He had only traded one prison for another. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope burned. If he could survive long enough, maybe he could find a way to turn this bargain into something more. Behind him, the woman walked with steady steps, her eyes cold but satisfied. She had stopped his death not out of kindness, but out of strategy. To her, he was not a man. He was a weapon. And a weapon, once sharpened, could change the fate of wars. The camp was hidden deep in the wild lands, far from the shining towers of the alien city. The human was taken there under heavy guard, but as he looked around, he noticed the difference. This place was not polished or rich like the city. The ground was rough, the tents patched together from cloth and metal, and the smell of smoke hung in the air. Warriors trained with strange weapons in the open field, their bodies moving in rhythm. But even to the human's eyes, their movements were stiff and predictable. They lacked the sharpness of survival. They fought as if following a dance, not as if their lives depended on it. The alien woman, the one who had saved him from death, led him through the camp. The warriors stopped and stared, some whispering, others glaring. To them, he was still a predator, a beast, a monster they had wanted dead. Yet here he was, walking beside their leader. He felt their hatred, but he also saw their curiosity. They had heard the stories about him, the human who killed with his bare hands, who fought without fear. She stopped in front of a large tent that seemed stronger than the rest. Inside, maps and weapons were laid out. She gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing, his eyes sharp. She looked at him with calm patience. This is where your work begins, she said. He crossed his arms. What work? You will train them, she replied, pointing outside where her warriors practiced. They are disciplined, but discipline is not enough. They will die against the enemy. I want you to make them into predators like you. He let out a short, bitter laugh. You want me to make your soldiers killers like me? Why should I? Her eyes narrowed. Because if you don't, you die. Do not think I saved you out of mercy. I saved you because you are useful. If you prove me wrong, I will put the blade to your neck myself. He stared at her, and for a moment neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with tension. Finally, he turned his head to the training field. The warriors swung their weapons again and again, but with no life in their movements. He shook his head. They don't know how to survive. They only know how to follow orders. That's why they lose. She tilted her head. Then, teach them survival. The next day, he was thrown into the center of the training field. The warriors gathered around, muttering in disgust. Many demanded to know why a human, an enemy, a predator, was allowed to stand among them. She silenced them with one raised hand. He will train you, she declared. If you can defeat him, then you may challenge my decision. If not, you will obey. The warriors grinned, eager to humiliate him. One stepped forward, tall and broad, his muscles heavy under his armor. He carried a glowing spear and snarled at the human. One strike, and I will end this beast. The human's hands were bare. He had no weapon, no armor. He only stretched his shoulders and waited. The crowd cheered for their warrior, certain the human would fall. The duel began with a roar. The alien lunged with his spear, fast and powerful. But the human moved differently, smooth, quick, like a shadow. He sidestepped, grabbed the shaft of the spear, and twisted with brutal force. The warrior stumbled, off balance. Before anyone could blink, the human slammed his elbow into the alien's jaw and swept his legs out from under him. The warrior hit the ground hard, the spear clattering away. The crowd gasped in shock. The human didn't stop. He pinned the warrior to the ground with his knee and pressed his fist against the alien's throat. "Dead," he said simply. The silence was heavy. No one had expected it. The alien woman watched with careful eyes, hiding her satisfaction. She had wanted them to see the truth, that this man, this predator, was stronger than any of them. Another warrior shouted in anger and charged forward. Then, another. Soon 3 were rushing him at once. The human moved like lightning. He dodged a blade, caught an arm, broke it with a sharp twist. He rolled across the dirt, kicked one in the chest, and sent him flying into the crowd. The last tried to stab him with a curved dagger, but the human caught his wrist and drove his knee into the alien's stomach, dropping him to the ground, gasping for air. When the dust settled, 3 warriors lay beaten, groaning in pain. The human stood tall, his chest rising with steady breath, his eyes cold and unshaken. He had fought with nothing but his body, yet he had crushed them all. The warriors who had been mocking him now stared in silence. Fear was in their eyes, but so was something else. Respect. They had seen with their own eyes why he was called Predator. The woman stepped forward and spoke loudly so all could hear. "You see now, you call him monster, but his strength is what will save you. Learn from him, and you may live. Refuse, and you will die like the fools you are." The human looked at the crowd. He did not want to help them. Their hatred still burned against him. But deep inside, he also saw an opportunity. If he could shape them, he might one day use them. If he could earn their respect, maybe he could earn something more: freedom. That night, as he sat by the fire, warriors kept their distance. Some glared, but none dared to speak. He could feel their eyes on him, weighing him, wondering what kind of creature he truly was. He ignored them and sharpened a broken piece of metal into a blade. The woman approached quietly. She studied him for a moment before speaking. "You impressed them today. They will follow you, even if they hate you." He looked up at her with a faint smirk. "You wanted a predator. Now you have one. But remember, predators bite." Her eyes glimmered with a strange mix of warning and approval. She knew he was dangerous, but that was exactly why she wanted him. In the silence of the camp, with smoke rising into the night sky, the human realized something important. He was no longer just a prisoner waiting for death. He was a teacher, a warrior, a weapon placed in the center of an army. And with every lesson he gave them, with every fight he won, he was carving out his own path, one step closer to power, and perhaps one step closer to freedom. The days in the camp turned into weeks, and the human trained the alien warriors harder than they had ever been trained before. He made them fight without weapons, forcing them to use their bodies, their instincts, their speed. He made them crawl through mud, climb rocks with bleeding hands, and spar until they could no longer stand. Many cursed him, many hated him, but they followed his commands because they had seen what he could do. He was faster, stronger, and smarter in battle than any of them, and slowly his ways began to shape them. One night, under the pale glow of alien moons, he stood in the training field surrounded by dozens of warriors. They had begged him to prove himself once more, to show them that his strength was not a trick. At their center stood the clan's strongest fighter, a giant alien with skin like stone and eyes filled with pride. The others whispered his name with respect. He had never been defeated, not even once. The human stepped forward with no armor, no weapon, just his bare hands. The crowd roared as the giant raised his heavy axe, its blade glowing with deadly light. The human only tilted his head, calm and ready. The duel began with a sudden strike. The axe came down like thunder. The human dodged at the last moment, the blade carving deep into the dirt. With quick movements, he grabbed a fist-sized rock and smashed it against the giant's jaw. The warrior staggered, but did not fall. He swung again, faster this time, but the human rolled to the side, kicked the warrior's knee, and forced him down. The fight was brutal. Every strike from the alien was powerful enough to crush bones, but every counter from the human was sharp, precise, and merciless. He attacked the weak spots, the eyes, the knees, the throat. Step by step, the giant slowed, his strength fading under the human's relentless strikes. Finally, the The human caught him off balance, twisted his arm behind his back, and slammed him face first into the ground. Dust rose into the air, and silence spread across the camp. The strongest warrior lay defeated, groaning in pain. The human stood over him, breathing steady, his foot pressing the warrior's head into the dirt. He looked at the crowd and said in a voice cold as steel, "Strength is nothing without control. Power means nothing without skill. Remember that." The silence broke into shouts and cries. Some cheered, others shouted in disbelief, but none could deny what they had seen. The human had beaten the unbeatable. From that night, many began to call him War Master. The name spread through the camp like fire, whispered with fear and respect. The alien woman had watched everything from the edge of the field. She did not cheer, she did not speak, but her eyes never left him. She had gambled on this human, and now her gamble was paying off. Her warriors were growing stronger under his hand. They were learning not just to fight, but to survive. But not everyone was pleased. In the shadows, whispers spread. Spies from rival clans had already carried the news back to their masters. The human predator was alive. Worse, he was training warriors, shaping them into killers. The enemy leaders sat in their councils, worried. If this continued, the balance of power would shift. They began to plan. Inside the camp, jealousy grew as well. Some warriors could not accept that an outsider, a human, stood above them. At night, they whispered about betraying him, about striking when he least expected. Yet none dared to face him openly again. The memory of their broken champion lying in the dirt was still too fresh. The human himself felt the change. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him. Once, they had looked at him with hatred. Now, it was respect, even awe. Yet he did not trust it. Respect could turn into fear, and fear could turn into betrayal. He knew better than to think he was safe. One evening, as he sat sharpening a blade, the woman approached him. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "They follow you now. Some even fear you more than they fear me." He looked at her with calm eyes. "That is not my problem." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "It will be your problem if they begin to choose you over me." He leaned back and smirked. "Afraid of losing your throne?" Her gaze hardened, but she did not answer right away. Instead, she said, "I gave you life when everyone wanted your death. Do not forget that." He met her eyes without flinching. "And do not forget, I never asked for it." The air between them grew heavy. They both knew the truth. She had saved him not out of kindness, but out of strategy. Yet now, her plan carried risk. The human was no longer just her weapon. He was becoming something larger, something she might not be able to control. That night, while the camp slept, shadows moved outside the walls. Enemy spies had crept close, watching, listening, counting numbers. They whispered to each other about the human predator, about the way he fought. One of them swore he saw him defeat 3 warriors with his bare hands. Another said he had trained a dozen more to fight like shadows. The spies returned to their masters with one clear message: the predator is alive, and he is dangerous. The woman received a warning the next morning from her scouts. The enemy was moving, preparing something. She looked toward the human as he drilled her warriors, his voice harsh, his strikes sharper than any blade. For the first time, she felt a small tremor of unease. She had unleashed something powerful. The human noticed her watching him and gave her the faintest smile. It was not the smile of gratitude, nor of loyalty. It was the smile of someone who knew his place in the game was changing. He was no longer a prisoner, no longer just a weapon. He was becoming a legend. And legends, once born, could not be chained forever. The night was heavy with silence when the attack came. The campfires burned low. Warriors slept in their tents, and only a few guards kept watch on the walls. Suddenly, shadows moved in the darkness. Arrows whistled through the air, striking the guards before they could raise the alarm. The camp exploded with noise as enemies stormed inside, their blades flashing, their war cries filling the night. The human woke instantly, his instincts sharper than any alarm. He grabbed the blade he had been sharpening beside him and burst out of his tent. Chaos spread around him. Warriors stumbling half awake, fire spreading where arrows had struck, enemies cutting through the defenses. He did not hesitate. He ran straight into the fight. 3 enemies rushed at him with curved blades. He ducked under the first strike, drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest, and slammed his knife into the second one's throat. The third tried to strike from behind, but the human twisted, grabbed his wrist, and snapped it with a sharp crack before slamming his head into the dirt. The alien warriors of the camp froze for a moment, watching him tear through the attackers with a speed and savagery they could not match. The woman appeared at the edge of the battle, her armor glowing under the firelight. An enemy warrior aimed a spear at her, charging forward with a roar. Before she could even lift her blade, the human crossed the distance and tackled the attacker. They rolled across the ground, the spear scraping past her face. The human ripped the weapon away and drove it into the enemy's chest, pinning him to the earth. He rose, breathing hard, his eyes sharp, and stood between her and the enemies. For the first time, she looked at him not just as a weapon, but as a shield. She saw how fast he moved, how natural it was for him to protect her without even thinking. He had saved her life in a single moment, and she could not deny it. The battle raged on. The enemies outnumbered them, but the human fought with a fury that turned the tide. He leapt into the thickest fights, tearing weapons from his enemies, breaking bones, and cutting down anyone who came near. His movements were wild but precise, the perfect balance of chaos and control. Blood stained his arms, his face, but his eyes burned with the fire of survival. Her warriors, inspired by his fearlessness, rallied around him. They followed his movements, copying his tactics. Where they had once been stiff and predictable, they now struck with suddenness, with desperation, with instinct. The training he had forced into them began to show. They fought not like soldiers in a drill, but like hunters protecting their lives. The woman cut her way to his side, her blade clashing against enemy steel. For a brief moment, she fought back to back with him. She could hear his breathing, heavy but steady, and she realized he was not fighting for her people. He was fighting because that was what he was. A predator who would never stop until the threat was gone. Then the enemy leader appeared, a massive warrior in dark armor, his voice booming above the chaos. He carried a long blade that shimmered with deadly energy, and his very presence made her warriors step back in fear. He saw the human and pointed his weapon at him. "The beast dies tonight!" The human stepped forward, his blade held low, his eyes never leaving the enemy. The two clashed with a sound like thunder. Sparks flew as their weapons struck again and again. The enemy leader's strength was immense, each blow heavy enough to break stone, but the human moved faster, lighter. He dodged, countered, struck at weak points. The ground around them turned to dust as they battled. The camp watching in silence, forgetting even their own fights. The enemy swung high, trying to cleave him in two, but the human stepped in close, slamming his elbow into the warrior's ribs, then driving his blade deep into the side of his neck. The leader roared in rage, staggering backward, swinging wildly, but the human did not let him breathe. He struck again and again, until the giant fell to the ground with a crash. Silence followed. Then the camp erupted in shouts and cheers. The enemies, seeing their leader fall, began to retreat. The alien warriors chased them to the edges of the camp, cutting down the stragglers. The fires still burned, smoke rising into the night sky, but the camp had survived. The human stood over the fallen leader, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. His body was covered in blood, some of it his, most of it not. His hands shook slightly, but his eyes were calm. Around him, the warriors gathered, staring at him with awe. They whispered his name, not predator, but savior. The woman approached slowly, her armor scorched, her hair loose from the fight. She looked at him with something she had never shown before, respect. She spoke softly, almost as if only for him. "You saved me tonight. Without you, we would all be dead." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You wanted me to kill for you. I did. But don't forget, I did it because I choose to survive, not because I serve you." Her lips tightened, but she did not argue. She knew his words were true. Yet, deep inside, she also knew something had changed. The human was no longer just her tool. Her people had seen him fight, had seen him save them when their own strength had failed. They would not forget it. That night, as the camp repaired itself, the warriors sat by the fire and whispered his name with reverence. Children peeked out from tents to glimpse the man who had fought like a storm. And the woman, sitting alone in her tent, thought about the moment when his body shielded hers from the spear. She had not asked him to save her, but he had done it anyway. The human sat apart from them all, his knife still in his hand, staring into the flames. He knew the truth. His skills, the same ones that had made him a prisoner and a monster in their eyes, had now made him their hero. But heroes were dangerous. Heroes became too powerful, and he wondered how long it would take before the same people who cheered his name would fear him once more. The camp was different after the night of the attack. The warriors no longer looked at the human with only hate or fear. They looked at him with respect, with something close to admiration. When he walked past, some nodded their heads, others whispered the new name they had given him, War Master. Even children peeked out of the tents to stare at him, as if he were not a man but a legend walking among them. But with respect came danger. The alien woman, their leader, noticed the change too. She had once been the one they all feared and obeyed without question. Now their eyes turned toward the human. Around the fire, they told stories of how he had killed the enemy leader, of how he had saved their camp with nothing but his fury and skill. Some of the warriors even said, if he let us, we would never lose again. She heard these whispers, and though her face showed nothing, inside her chest a storm was growing. She called him to her tent one evening. The air was thick with silence as she studied him, her sharp eyes trying to pierce his thoughts. They follow you, she said finally. He shrugged. They follow strength. That's how it always is. Her voice was low, controlled. Too much strength in the wrong hands can break an empire. He met her gaze without fear. Maybe your empire deserves to break. The words cut through her like a blade. She should have been furious, yet instead she felt a strange pull. He was not afraid of her, not like the others. He spoke to her as if she were not above him, not untouchable, but just another being. That made her feel both threatened and alive. The council noticed the change as well. They came to her in secret, their voices sharp with warning. He is dangerous. Your people speak of him too often. They will choose him over you if you let this continue. She snapped back. He is mine. He owes his life to me. But the council elder only shook his head. One day, you may owe your life to him, and when that happens, he will not give it for free. The human, meanwhile, continued his training of the warriors. He taught them how to move quietly at night, how to strike from the shadows, how to use fear as a weapon. He showed them how to fight without mercy, how to see every weakness in an enemy's stance. Day by day, they grew sharper, faster, deadlier. They began to win small battles against their rivals, and each time, the warriors shouted his name louder than before. One afternoon, after a long day of drills, the woman confronted him again. She watched the way the warriors laughed with him, how they slapped his shoulders, how they looked at him with trust. Her voice was sharp when she asked, "Do you plan to take them from me?" He looked at her calmly, wiping sweat from his brow. "I don't need to take them. They'll follow whoever they believe in." Her jaw tightened. "And they believe in you." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he said, softer, "I don't want your throne. I want my freedom." Those words shook her more than anger would have. Freedom. She had almost forgotten what it meant. She had been born into chains of power, bound by duty, by politics, by endless wars. And here was this human, once chained for death, speaking of freedom as if it were the only thing worth fighting for. That night, as the camp slept, she lay awake thinking about him. Was he her weapon, or was she his? She had saved his life because she thought she could control him. But control was slipping away. He had become more than she expected. The next day, during training, she tested him. She stood before all the warriors and ordered him to face her in combat. The camp fell silent. Warriors circled around them, eager to see their leader fight the human predator. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "If I fight you, I won't hold back." Her lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Good. Neither will I." They clashed fiercely, her blade against his bare hands. She struck fast, her style sharp and elegant, but he was faster, raw and unpredictable. Sparks flew as metal cut the air, as his fists slammed against her defenses. She nearly lost her footing once, but she recovered with a swift counter. The crowd roared at every strike, every near victory. Finally, he caught her wrist, twisted it, and drove her to the ground. He pressed his knee against her chest, his fist raised high. The warriors gasped. Their leader was at his mercy. For a long moment, he stayed like that, his eyes burning into hers. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand and stepped back. "I could have killed you, but I didn't." She rose, breathing hard, her pride wounded, but her heart racing. She looked at him with something new in her eyes, trust mixed with fear, and something deeper she dared not name. She turned to her warriors and shouted, "This is why he trains you. This is why you obey, because even I cannot break him." The camp erupted in cheers, not just for her words, but for him. Their respect for him only grew. Later, when the fire burned low and the camp was quiet, he sat alone sharpening his blade. She approached, her steps soft. She stopped beside him and said quietly, "You could have taken everything from me today." He did not look at her. "I don't want what's yours. I only want to live on my own terms." For the first time, her voice softened. "Maybe, one day, I will give you that." He glanced at her then, his eyes searching hers. There was no smile, no kindness, only honesty. And in that moment, both of them realized the truth. They were bound together, not by chains, not by orders, but by something far more dangerous. The predator was no longer just her weapon, he was her equal. And that made him the most dangerous man in her world. The sky was red with fire when the final battle began. The enemy came with their full force this time. Rows of armored warriors, banners waving, their weapons shining under the burning sun. Drums thundered like the heartbeat of war, shaking the ground as thousands marched forward. The alien woman stood at the front of her clan, her face calm but her heart heavy. She knew this battle would decide everything. If they lost, her people would be wiped out. The human walked beside her, his eyes sharp and steady. He had no armor like theirs, only simple leather straps and the blade he had carried since the night of the attack. But his presence gave strength to the warriors around him. They looked at him with awe, whispering his name, some even calling him savior. He felt their eyes on him, but he pushed it aside. He was not here for their praise. He was here because survival demanded it. The horns of the enemy sounded, and the clash began. The ground shook as both sides rushed forward. Spears clashed, swords flashed, and the air filled with screams. The human charged at the front, moving like a storm through the chaos. He cut down one warrior, then another, each strike precise and brutal. Blood splattered across his arms, but he did not stop. He was everywhere, striking, dodging, breaking the enemy line. Her warriors followed his lead. They'd learned from him, and now their training showed. They fought with instinct, with hunger, not just stiff movements from drills. They bit, clawed, and struck with the ferocity of predators. For the first time, the enemy hesitated, realizing these were not the same weak warriors they had faced before. The alien woman fought at his side, her blade dancing in deadly arcs. Once an enemy nearly struck her from behind, but the human's knife flew through the air, sinking into the attacker's throat. She turned, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment, and in that glance, she saw it again. He was not fighting for her, not for her clan, but because that was who he was. A man who refused to die quietly. Hours passed, and the battle grew bloodier. The enemy sent in their strongest soldiers, towering figures in heavy armor. One by one, the human cut them down, his movements fueled by pure will. He leapt onto one's back, wrapped his arm around its throat, and twisted until the creature fell lifeless. Another swung a hammer the size of a tree, but he rolled under it, slashed at the knees, and finished the giant as it crashed to the ground. Each victory lifted the spirits of his side, each kill making his legend grow larger. But then came the enemy general, a monstrous warrior, taller than all the rest, his armor black and his weapon glowing with deadly light. His very presence made even brave fighters stumble back. He roared, pointing his blade straight at the human. The crowd fell silent, waiting. Everyone knew this would decide the war. The human stepped forward without fear. His body was bleeding, his muscles screaming from exhaustion, but his eyes burned with fire. The two met in the center of the battlefield, and when their blades clashed, the sound shook the earth. The fight was brutal. The general swung with crushing power, each blow heavy enough to kill in one strike. The human dodged, countered, striking fast like lightning. Sparks flew as steel met steel, and the crowd formed a circle, warriors on both sides pausing to watch. It was no longer just a fight, it was a duel between predator and giant. The general caught him once, slamming him across the chest with a blow that sent him crashing to the ground. Blood filled his mouth, but he spat it out and rose again. The woman cried out, wanting to rush to his aid, but she stopped herself. She saw it in his eyes. If anyone interfered, he would rather die than be saved. The general charged, raising his blade for the final strike. At the last moment, the human sidestepped, grabbed the general's wrist, and twisted with all his strength. The weapon fell from his hand. In a heartbeat, the human drove his blade deep into the general's chest. The massive warrior roared, staggered, and collapsed with a crash that shook the battlefield. Silence fell. Then a roar erupted from the woman's clan. The enemy, seeing their general dead, broke and fled. Warriors threw down their weapons and scattered, leaving the field in chaos. The battle was over. The human stood in the center, his chest heaving, his body soaked in blood. Around him, her warriors cheered his name, raising their weapons high. "War Master! War Master!" they cried. The same people who once cursed him now shouted with pride, as if he were the heart of their clan. The woman walked to him slowly. She saw his strength, his defiance, his refusal to bow even in the face of death. She realized then that he was no longer just a weapon she had saved. He had become something greater, something even she could not fully control. He was a predator, yes, but now he was also a legend. She stood before him, her voice steady but softer than ever. "Today, you saved more than my life. You saved all of us." He looked at her, his expression hard. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I refused to die on anyone's command. Not yours, not theirs. I fight for myself." She held his gaze, and for the first time she smiled faintly. "And yet, by fighting for yourself, you gave us a future." The camp celebrated that night, the fires burning high, songs filling the air. But the human sat apart, sharpening his blade, staring into the flames. He heard their voices, their cheers, their laughter, but he did not join them. He knew the truth. Respect and fear were two sides of the same coin. Today, they cheered his name. Tomorrow, they might whisper again that he was too dangerous. Yet he also knew one more truth. He was no longer a prisoner waiting for execution. He was no longer just a predator trapped in chains. He was free in a way he had never been before. And in the silence of the night, with the fire reflecting in his eyes, he realized something deeper. They had saved him from death, yes. But in the end, it was his deadly skills, the very reason they had once wanted him executed, that had saved them all.